Welcome everyone to the sixth session of the Connect University Autumn School on secure and sustainable digital infrastructures. I'm Alex. I will be your host for the entire week, but today also merely warming up everyone for the main topic, which is Web2 versus Web3 towards the next generation internet. Now, as you might know, we in Connect University, we started back in 2015. We are the knowledge sharing flagship initiative of DigiConnect, which aims to update both the EU staff and you, the general public, about the latest digital trends, as well as important digital policies. The scope of our sessions in general is to put at the same table EU institutions, industry, academia, and international organizations, helping us find inspiration from each other, identify current opportunities and threats to policymaking. For those of you who are not yet connected via sly.do, we invite you to do so using the code Web3. I say this because over there you can ask us questions and I will make sure that they make their way towards the speakers. The way we'll proceed today is we will take after each presentation only short clarification question. We will bundle up all the rest of the general questions at the end in the panel. Also, in case you want to share any insights from today, we encourage everyone to use on social media the hashtag Connect University and the digital infrastructures. The recordings of today, of all the sessions actually, will be available as of next week, and you will be able to find them on the Digital EU channel on YouTube and on Futurium on the reserve space on Connect University. We actually invite everyone to join Futurium. It is the place where we have spots reserved for all communities on the digital area, where we encourage everyone to share their voice and where we also take inspiration when guiding us forward in planning future sessions. Generally speaking, technology moves pretty fast, so we must run alongside with it, and we really need to make sure that we have all the tools available and the most up-to-date information, so we make sure we reach our destination in good shape. Before we start the core session of today, I want to give you just a small peek of tomorrow as well as on Friday as to what you might expect in terms of future destinations in the autumn school. So tomorrow morning, Thursday, we will start with the session on high performance computing and quantum infrastructure deployment in Europe. So rather technical, but needed. After that, in the afternoon, we will continue with our session on an industrial platform economy to spur innovation. On Friday, we will begin with the session on mobile generations from 1G to 5G and beyond. And lastly, we will have a closing session with our General Director, Roberto Viola, who will give the most important takeaways of the week from each session. We will take a holistic view of the autumn school topics and their relation to policy. And we will also share some of the Commission's planning and concerns in the future regarding greening digital infrastructures. As for our session on today on Web2 and Web3, in order to give a more comprehensive context, as well as shed some light for non-experts such as I, but as well as those of you who are more fluent on the matter, we have with us today Gemma Carolillo, Head of Unit in DigiConnect in Next Generation Internet, Shermin Voshnier, founder of Blockchain Hub and director of the Research Institute for Crypto-economics at the Vienna University of Economics, Fernando Almeida, Professor, Instituto Superior de Politécnico Gaia. And last but not least, Paula Hedebert, Head of Legal and Public Affairs at Archipels.io and Chair of INA-TBA's Privacy Working Group. So without further ado, Gemma, please, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Alexandro. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Great. I'm trying to launch also the presentation. I hope that works well.
Yes, we can see.
You can see it correctly. So good afternoon. It's a real pleasure to be here today with you and also with our guests. Allow me in the sense that being from DigiConnect, so I'm from the same team of the Connect University organizing this session. And as Alexandro mentioned, so what I'm going to do now is to provide a bit of the chapeau, the context for the session of today, presenting a few things. First of all, what is the policy context we are moving in as regards next generation internet and the internet development in general, and then presenting specifically the initiative which is named Next Generation Internet and is basically under the competence of my team in DigiConnect, so that we then also, I would say, zoom in into the next steps and what our distinguished speakers will present us as regards Web3. So, as I mentioned, we are moving into a quite complex policy and regulatory framework. So we have had it in the description of the session. So needless to say that the internet is the biggest revolution of our times. One of the most fascinating things is that we learn that the internet architecture, the core of the internet and its protocols remain more or less the same, but they keep evolving to allow us reach new frontiers like the one we are discussing today. You see now on the slide, the EU policy and regulatory framework. Of course, the internet is a global phenomenon, and it's a global project. I would say project of the humankind. But we want to focus on what the Europe can contribute to and what Europe intends to contribute to, because it's clear that being the digital one of the driving force of our societies, it's clear that to kind of master its future, Europe needs to take an active role in defining the evolution of the internet. So what I will try to explain, but in a very few words. I mean, do not get me wrong, we cannot go into the whole wealth of policies you can see now on screen, is how the EU is trying to contribute to building the future internet, as we call it, as an internet of humans. This is the next generation internet visions. And now we can deliver internet technologies that basically espouse those vision, so that enable better control of our life, respect of the privacy, permits better sharing of data. Now, as I said, on screen you see mentioned some of the most important EU initiatives. These cover the whole digital transformation. Not all of them relate, strictly speaking, to the internet architecture or to the functioning of the internet. And as I said, we won't go into all of them. But all of them, they're absolutely relevant as they contribute to our experience as users of the World Wide Web. So also the outer layer of the internet, how the users experience the internet. So while we have, policies related, for example, to the security of the internet, of the digital infrastructure providers, like the NIS directive of the cybersecurity strategy, we have regulation covering artificial intelligence, and we have the recent regulatory initiatives on platforms. It's clear these do not impact the stricto sensu the functioning of the internet, but they impact a lot how we experience it. Same goes for the most well-known General Data Protection Regulation. Two things I want to highlight from the set of policies and initiatives, and actually these are not on the regulatory side, but it refers to how we see the internet needing to develop. So we have the EU Declaration on the Digital Principles and Rights. This is now an initiative at the moment from the European Commission, but which is being discussed with the European Parliament and the Council with the objective of making an EU-wide. And it's a declaration when there is, I would say, a clear set of principles and rights in the digital sphere that should inform both the action of the policymakers and the regulators, but should especially inform the users of what is conceived as their rights in the digital sphere. And there, among the main message is that the European way for the digital transformation, and this goes for the internet, is putting people at the center. And then there are, of course, more the specific principles related, for example, to the fact that the same rights that are offline should apply online, and to the fact that individuals, and this is also quite relevant to how this is implemented, and we are discussing this today, how the individual take control over their data and their privacy. Or, for example, the ethical design and the use of algorithms. And then, since I mentioned at the beginning, of course, we don't forget internet is a global phenomenon. There is the Declaration for the Future of the Internet, which is a very, very important international initiative where the European Union is one of the leaders, together with over 60 partners around the world, whose main objective is reclaiming the promise of the internet. So see the internet that continues to be an open network of network, an interconnected communication system for all the humanity. And in the Declaration for the Future of Internet, there is a clear definition of what we mean for the future of the internet. So an internet which is open, free, global, interoperable, secure, and reliable. Once again, the declaration goes into more detailed principles. Now, the Commission is willing to address what are seen as the main challenges of the internet: trust, openness, decentralization. Some of these issues, such as decentralization and data ownership, increased trust, these are among the objectives of the Web3, for example. But also the way this can be achieved, such objectives, there are different avenues. For example, several ongoing EU initiatives resonate with the objectives of the Web3, despite not relying necessarily on the blockchain, like the Data Act, which is basically in line with the idea that users and companies should have more control over their data and who they share it with. And also not the European digital identity proposals, which is clearly very important in creating a strong solution for EU citizens. Among the policies mentioned here, you see the digital commons. This is something I wanted to highlight because it's very relevant to our vision for next generation internet. Because digital commons are seen as information and knowledge resources, basically, that are collectively created and owned or shared among a community. They power most of the open internet infrastructure and server, and there are also very known success stories at the level of the application of digital commons, such as Wikipedia. So what we are doing with the Next Generation Internet Initiative is really trying to nurture the digital commons, considering that in this definition, most of the open source software and hardware and open data can be included. So the Next Generation Internet, it's you see, I put it in between. So we have all these wealth of initiatives at EU level, at the global level. I referenced the Declaration for the Future of the Internet. And we have a very specific vision for the Next Generation Internet, which is creating this Internet of humans. what is, I mean, in the middle, in a way. So we have the shaping the development and evolution of the internet of humans, which responds to the people's needs and reflects the EU values. But then we have the, I would say, the funding arms, which is aiming at technology development and updates. So this is what we do with the Next Generation Internet. This is a research and innovation initiative from the European Commission. I'm going now to present the main pillars, but to say that we do the research, we try to contribute with our innovators to the standard setting, nurture a community of top talents, internet innovators, and we are also actually moving into piloting. So the main pillars of the next generation internet. We have here at the core this human-centric vision of the internet. Then there are the values, which are those we just described, values related to the openness, the privacy, decentralization, inclusion, and sustainability. We have the technologies that try to support the implementation of this vision, and we have the funding arms. As I would say, the funding arms through the research and innovation, the way we conceive the research and innovation, the way we structure the funding, also has helped so far building a very important community of internet innovators. A couple of things. So the technologies you see mentioned here, so we refer to search and discovery, internet architecture and standards, the digital identity and data sovereignty. This is an example of the technologies we're finding under NGI with a very strong open source component. This is the reference to the policy on the digital commons I made before. But they try to address, in a way, the issues underpinning the values we are mentioning, such as the one on decentralization, such as the one linked to the need to keep the internet open and trusted space. In terms of the funding, I will not go into the details of how we do it, but just to say that how we get to this community of innovators I was mentioning before. We try to get it in a very non-commissioned way, if possible, meaning with keeping very low administrative procedures. So we have a pool of intermediary projects who know the community, know how to reach them, and select for us the best projects that are funded. In this way, the applicants, the innovators that are even, I mentioned startups and developers, you see this on screen, but we have even individuals contributing to next generation internet. They have they have an easy path in a way in terms of bureaucratic procedures, and they need to show the relevance, of course, of their idea as regards the objectives of the calls. So in this way, we have shaped the community. And this is actually a way of working which has helped us getting close to the people who are making the internet and shaping its evolution. So what we have here, current landscape, we are in operation since 4 years now. We have invested a few millions, both under the Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Program, and there is a renewed investment now for the coming 7 years. I mean, of course, we are looking at the short term at the moment. So what we had for the past 2 years, and we have earmarked more funding for the coming 2 years. What is very important for us is that with this kind of system we call cascading funding, so working through intermediaries that help get us close to the innovators, we have now funded more than 600 projects that basically they deliver the concrete solutions. I will present a few. In a wide range of topics. So a lot it relates to topics that are mirroring the values. So we have privacy enhancing technology, data governance, and self-sovereignty identity, decentralized technology. So basically they are mirroring the values I discussed before. And the most important, the community now, we count more than 1,000 top talents, internet innovators in our community. And as I say, this is a bit peculiar funding mechanism for the Commission. We have so far managed to attract like the vast majority of people who never had received European funding. So we're talking 83% of these recipients, beneficiaries, they were new to EC funding. And in line with the policy of the digital commons I was presenting before, it's basically vast majority open source. So you see on screen now what we call the NGI galaxy. So just to show a bit what we are talking about in terms of solutions. First of all, to say that the solutions that we have developed through NGI are accessible. There is an online catalog, over 600 of them, and they cover hardware, software, application solutions that are all meant to build an internet fit for the digital age. And they cover the interesting thing, a broad range of technology building blocks that can be used in any sector. Health, energy, supply chain, research, I mean, you name it. Also, the range of applications cover really a differentiated set of categories. So from the hardware and manufacturing to network infrastructure, software engineering, until you get to services and applications such as the email, instant messaging, and so on. So we really cover a bit everything from hardware, software, and applications. And just to give a couple of examples among these, because very typically when we discuss digital commons, we refer to open software, but under NGI, we are also quite engaged with open hardware. And one of the solutions that has been developed related to computer conceived with open hardware technology. So specifically for the topic of today that we are discussing decentralized solutions in a way which go into the Web3, I wanted to mention just few. I mean, I will not, the presentation will be available anyway. I will not go into the details of all the projects, but there are specific, in this NGI catalog, specific solutions from the category of decentralized solutions. Some of them, like the first three you have on screen, they refer to the self-sovereignty identity, which is very key concept related to the fact that the individual should have control of the information associated with their identity, and the fact that there should be basically no lock-in with big platforms in terms of identifying the users. So solutions that we have here, I mean, they relate to the several application areas, to decentralized science for peer reviewing, for education institutions. The first one, the BC diploma, is referring basically to wallets, digital wallets for both students and enterprise, and it's being used by more than 100 universities. And we have also the block zone, which adds self-sovereignty identity to the communications, again enabling the seamless identification into communication exchanges. But just to give an example, not all of these solutions are necessarily relying on self-sovereignty identity or blockchain. So there are solutions like Briar, which is based, which enables secure communication, and this is based on shared with the sharing of encrypted messages that are synchronized directly between the user's devices. So it's there is a wealthy, I would say, of solutions, more than 600 very different areas across the internet stack, which I really recommend checking, because these are in a way, I mean, we discuss about the values, but this is how we implement, giving the tools to the users to experience the internet the way we preach it in a way. So I will go very fast for the next step. So this is what we have done so far. We have developed a vision, we have built a community which keeps growing, and we have developed a big number of internet technologies. Now, what we are going to do for the future? First of all, the main objective is to keep what works. This is key lessons in policy making. So we want to maintain the next generation internet as a bottom-up initiative where there is funding to the that reaches the real innovators, and that where there is a lot of policy feedback loop, because we need also to keep integrating what's coming up into the vision for NGI. And again, we will maintain a very strong focus on open source. You have seen I have perhaps even expanded a lot on the links with the EU policies. We want to keep reinforcing this link, because it's important that if we want to be able to provide solutions to deliver a vision of the internet, we need to maintain this link very close. But we want to invest more and more in vertical use cases. This is key. I mentioned already the idea of testing the solutions in several sectors, and this is what we'll continue doing. But what is more, and again, perhaps it opens for the other introductions, is that we want to integrate emerging trends. This is absolutely important, because this is how we have managed so far to make sure that the next generation internet is up to speed with what are the needs. So it's really important that technology-wise, we keep integrating the new trends. And the one we are discussing today is extremely relevant for also being integrated more in the work that we do. So thank you, Alexandra. Will be happy to take questions, but more than happy, especially to listen to the other speakers.
Definitely. Thank you, Gemma, indeed. And it's good that you mentioned that we have a roadmap ahead, and especially a roadmap that is guided by values, because I think if we cannot agree on values, that it's quite challenging to agree on actual steps that we can take. In terms of questions, there are quite a few. As we mentioned, we will take them at the end, because I think we can get the experience from all speakers. And the clarification question, as in what decentralization actually means, I think Sherman will actually cover that. And if not, we will take that afterwards. So please, Sherman.
Thank you. Thank you for, yes, I will cover the question. So I hope this will be resolved at least by the end of my talk. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here. Just a quick clarification. You introduced me as the founder of Blockchain Hub and the director of the Research Institute for Crypto Economics, which was true in the past. I haven't been the director of that research institute. I was the co-founder and we started it, but since 2 years I started Token Kitchen. I'm also the author of the book Token Economy, which is coming out in the 3rd edition, but I'm now the founder of Token Kitchen, and we're doing some data-driven agricultural activities here in Portugal, and we want to create new value streams with tokenization, such as CO2 tokens, just to clarify my current activities. I will deep dive into the presentation just now. Give me a second to share it with you. All right. So you should see it. I'm going into full mode. All right, can you see my presentation? It's the starting page.
Yes, we can. Yes.
Yes. Sorry, I was in the full screen. All right. All right, so Web3 and the token economy. I know part of the audience already knows what Web3 is, or at least what blockchain networks are, and has some idea about tokens, but not everyone. So I will try to do a very quick tour de force through the most important topics, just to make sure that we have all the basics clarified. I do know that Fernando after me will be going into some of the more technical details of blockchain networks and the Web3. So you will have the opportunity to hear a lot of these topics from a different perspective, again, and in more depth. So what is the Web3? Requires also the question of how did the web or the internet evolve? So the internet existed since the 60s, but most people didn't use it because they didn't have computers and they didn't have the programming skills to use command line interfaces to connect to other computers. But the web or the internet really became a big thing with the World Wide Web, with the first visual websites that anyone could create with very little programming skills. And this brought us what we in hindsight now call the information revolution. Back then, for those who remember, we called it the information data highway because it was quite fascinating that we could access information on other computers just through a few clicks. But that was really a revolution back in the early 90s. It became easy to create a website with a few lines of code, but most people didn't know what to write on these websites, which is why very often websites would just say hello world. People were exciting to publish websites, but they didn't know what to put on it. And it took us around 10 years until the knowledge around what we can do with websites really matured. And this is what we then eventually called the Web2. It was not so much a technical revolution, it was an evolution. Websites became more powerful, and we started to learn that, well, we can create websites around different things, such as we can create websites where people can buy and sell things to each other. We can create websites, what we call e-commerce platforms or websites today. We can create websites where people can post knowledge and share knowledge with each other, such as Wikipedia. We can create websites where people can interact with each other socially, was brought upon with social media platforms. So really the Web2 was a front-end revolution that made the web more visually appealing, and that brought us this notion around this platform economy, around the exchange, peer-to-peer exchange of goods, services, and knowledge and content, but always with this middleman, this platform in the middle that is managing all the interactions, because all the transactions and interactions are cleared through their technical infrastructure and through their platforms. So the Web3 in this context is two things. It's this new generation internet, which is much more a backend revolution. It changes the way we collectively manage data in the backend of the internet. And the killer application, the main application, in my opinion, are the tokens. We will have a look at what that means in detail within the next. Okay, it seems that, okay, this is how I do it. All right, so just to zoom in onto the question Web2 versus Web3. To simplify, if you think of the cloud infrastructure today, many web services, cloud services, they're provided by either private or public institutions, but they're always centrally managed. Data goes through the servers of Facebook, Google, your bank, your government, and we have to trust these institutions that over the correct management of our data, clearing of transactions, and to preserve our privacy. But really, we don't have any control of what happens with our data. We can't go into the technical detail of why this has evolved like this, but basically, first generation, second generation infrastructure was very much, or is very much, managed around centralized services managed on client server infrastructure. The Web3 is this next generation internet that builds on a legacy of peer-to-peer networks. The cloud in the Web3, the backend services in the Web3 are collectively managed by a peer-to-peer cloud. And this kind of backbone of this peer-to-peer cloud are blockchain networks. And we have many blockchain networks with different purposes that have evolved over time. But blockchain networks are only one type of Web3 infrastructural component. And we have many, many other infrastructural components around peer-to-peer identity management, metadata, etc. And it's always about the sovereignty of assets and sovereignty of identity, really one of the goals of the European Union that has been presented just by my predecessor. In the front end, the Web3 is not much different from what we see today. We will keep using computers, mobile phones to access web applications, but web applications that run on the peer-to-peer cloud, on blockchain networks and other Web3 protocols. They are called decentralized applications because they're managed by a collectively maintained infrastructure. And the one component that's different is your kind of browser or your mobile app needs this component, a blockchain wallet. It's like a blockchain client that identifies you through public-private key infrastructure, through a cryptographic means, where you can control the state of all your tokens, voting rights, access rights, any tokenized right. We will have a look at these tokenized rights in a bit. So in the front end, the wallet is a key piece of software. In the back end, nodes in the peer-to-peer network collectively manage the operations of these Web3 infrastructural networks, such as blockchain networks. Okay, so what is a blockchain network? I'm sure we will hear a bit more detail on that in the next talk. But from my perspective, if we look at the history of ledgers, obviously before computers, ledgers of who owns what were tracked in an analog way. With the advent of computers, ledgers were digitized, but they were managed on private infrastructure, private computer infrastructure. And if these ledgers had to interact along a supply chain of goods, services, or financial transactions, they would need kind of interfaces. They would need to interface somehow, but one private organization does not have control over the data of another private organization. So before blockchain networks, every organization had their own ledger and relied on a trusted third party to clear transactions, financial transactions or other transactions along a supply chain of goods and services. So what blockchain networks introduced were kind of a collectively managed infrastructure where every node in the network it's a shared ledger of transactions that is collectively managed across organizations and individuals. Now, think of, this is why we refer to it as a distributed ledger or distributed ledger networks. So different computers, we refer to them as nodes in the network, they're operated by an individual or an organization. They operate these computer nodes in the network, and this computer node runs the protocol of the network, and they have a copy of this ledger of transactions. And think of the ledger as a spreadsheet in the cloud that is kind of a shared public ledger of transactions. Anyone in the network can inspect these transactions, and no single entity controls the state of the ledger. These blockchain networks can do one thing. They can collectively manage cryptographic kind of tokens, let's say. And these tokens represent a different set of things, different rights, ownership rights. They can represent an asset, access rights, management rights, or voting rights. So you can think of blockchain networks as collectively managed token or collective token management machines. right? They are collectively managed by all full nodes of the network, all computers in the network who have the full state of all transactions. And the tokens that are managed can represent something like a currency, but it can represent many other types of rights. And the user needs a wallet to authenticate and manage their tokens in a self-sovereign way. This whole thing, the Web3 started with Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is very often misunderstood in the general public because the media likes to simplify. What the Bitcoin token is a cryptocurrency, it is a digital currency, but it's also a peer-to-peer payment network that is collectively managed. And I think that we don't talk about this peer-to-peer token management component, at least not in the context with Bitcoin. We've abstracted it and referring to it as a blockchain network, but it's important to understand that the Bitcoin network allows peer-to-peer financial transaction, wallet to wallet, without an intermediary institution, or the intermediary institution is this collectively managed ledger, right? So the Bitcoin is three things. Bitcoin is three things. It's the Bitcoin protocol. It's kind of the computational constitution of the network, where the rules of the network are encoded in this protocol. You download this protocol to your computer and can now become a validator in the network. You can start to create transaction blocks, but you can only do it according to the network rules that are automatically enforced by the protocol. And anyone in the Bitcoin network or similar public and permissionless networks can download these protocols and become a collective kind of a contributor to the network. So the Bitcoin payment network is collectively managed by people who live in different countries, don't know each other, don't have legal agreements with each other, and this blockchain network, in the case of Bitcoin, the Bitcoin network is a decentralized autonomous organization. And it's very different to how traditional organizations work, where we need to generate trust through legal contracts to ensure that everyone performs to the predefined rules. And here we have a computational constitutional or smart contracts that make sure that the network actors comply with the rules that were predefined. So we can't go into much more detail here, but this is very important to understand also when it comes to how we should regulate these blockchain networks or the decentralized applications that are also organized as a DAO in the future. So DAOs, decentralized and autonomous organizations that are enforced by computer protocols, we refer to them as smart contracts, are a new institutional kind of a new form of institution over the internet, how people can organize themselves over the internet in the absence of legal contracts, but that does not mean that they should not comply with regulatory laws. It's just that trust is generated through these computationally enforced agreements. Getting back to the blockchain networks, how do we make sure that in a network of anonymous actors, where people don't know each other, they don't have legal agreements, they don't know, they don't even speak the language, that they all perform according to the same rules? And this was really the revolutionary aspect of the Bitcoin network. It found what we call consensus mechanism, in the case of Bitcoin is proof of work, to have a unified computational agreement about who's allowed to do when and what, and to prevent double spending in an anonymous network. And they solved a big problem of peer-to-peer networks that wasn't solved before. So the consensus mechanism makes sure that everyone complies to the rules, and it makes sure in through a set, like a combination of cryptographic rules and economic rules that make sure that it's like computationally or just too expensive to cheat the network. But we will look at this now. the proof of work was the first consensus network of how the different computers in the network reach consensus about which transaction is valid. But in the meantime, many other consensus mechanisms have evolved, the most important or dominant of which for now is proof of stake. We cannot go into the details of that, but it's important to understand that in the absence of legal contracts, consensus mechanism makes sure that the agreements are complied with. The aim of the consensus mechanism is to reach finality. Finality about the truthfulness of a token transactions. In analog system, when we have payments, the finality is reached when you buy something, when you hand over someone else cash. In electronic payment systems, pre-blockchain, a lot of a series of transactions in the back end of a point of sale system, private servers communicate with each other, and there is many legal construct of techno-legal processes make sure that when you buy something over the counter with your credit card, the merchant actually gets paid, even if you try to cheat the system, for example, or if you don't have enough money on your bank account. Now, in blockchain-based systems, these consensus protocols are designed to provide some kind of finality of token transactions, and depending on the type of consensus protocol, different types of probably finality can be reached. But these are technical details. Important though to mention that different types of consensus protocols have different types of levels of security, let's say. These consensus protocols are kind of powered or enabled through a set of mechanisms. The intersection of cryptographic tools and economic mechanisms are applied to make trustful transactions over peer-to-peer networks work. And this has opened a new scientific field on what we call crypto-economics today, on the intersection of cryptography and economic design. The cryptographic tools in these blockchain networks and other Web3 networks make sure they're used to secure network transactions. They provide full transparency for participants, or necessary transparency, not always full, while maintaining the privacy of or at least pseudonymity of each individual actor. The economic mechanisms are applied to make sure that future transactions will be conducted in a truthful manner. Right? And very often, network actors are incentivized with the network token. In the case of the Bitcoin network, is newly minted Bitcoin tokens are created the moment that you prove that you provided useful work to the network. So Bitcoins don't come out of thin air. They are generated upon proof of work. They're the internal currency of that network. Other blockchain networks have their own internal currencies that are rewarded as an incentive or used as an incentive mechanisms for network participants. I'm skipping a few things because so why is a ledger tamper resistant? Because in a blockchain network, every computer in the network has the same copy of the ledger, the same information of who kind of holds which tokens, but the who is anonymized over a blockchain address. So we don't know the personal name of the person or institution holding it. So if you try to tamper with information on one computer, on one ledger, all other computers in the network have a different set of information, so they will not validate the kind of transaction that you want to send from your computer. So, and this is, so it's distributed consensus, and you can try to manipulate all other computers on the network, but this is made economically infeasible, right? And this is why proof of work, albeit being very critical when it comes to environmental issues, it has a function, it makes the network safe. Now, over time, many people have taken the open source code of Bitcoin and they said, well, we want to create a different consensus mechanism, or we want to create a blockchain network that is not completely public and not completely permissionless. And over time, many different blockchain networks have emerged. The big question here is around governance. Who can read the network? Who can read network transactions? Who can write network transactions? Who can validate network transactions? And who can use the network? I think this is a very important question to ask when we want to design the government, can design or understand the governance structures of a blockchain network, when we want to understand how decentralized a network really is. Because if only 3 people run nodes, it's not as decentralized as when if only 500 people run nodes or 50,000 people run nodes. And the consensus mechanism is also a big distinguishing point of whether you need a consensus mechanism and what kind of consensus mechanism you need and what level of security this will provide to you. And for different purposes, different consensus mechanisms will be either necessary or, yes, necessary. Now, the main application, and I think I will have to be very fast, are the tokens. Tokens are not a new thing for native speakers. You know that token is a very generic word. It has been used, and we've as a humankind have been using tokens in various forms over millennia. Asset tokens, they as old as, probably the first asset tokens were shells and beans. Any, currency actually is a token. Any local currency or a casino jeton, a currency of a specific gaming facility, is a token. Tokens also exist in the computing world as computer tokens. They manage access rights. They can manifest as a QR code or parcel tracking code that we use in our day-to-day lives for buying when we have a train ticket or a flight tickets. So the concept of tokens is not a new thing, but tokens always had to be managed, and the security of kind of how do you call it, the anti-security mechanisms. Yeah, this decentralized entity always had to make sure that a token is not being copied, that a ticket is not being used twice. Anti-counterfeiting mechanisms were very integral part of token management. Now, blockchain tokens or Web3 tokens in this new emerging Web3 are effective rights management tools that are collectively managed by this blockchain infrastructure. So this anti-counterfeiting mechanism comes baked in with the technology. The blockchain network as such, or the ledger as such, is like the digital notary that makes sure that every token transaction can only be performed once. Now, there is a bit of a misconception what tokens can represent. We very often talk about cryptocurrencies or crypto assets, tokens that represent an ownership right, a property right, but tokens really can represent many other rights, and they can also be hybrid. Even Bitcoin itself is a hybrid token in a way, because it also represents some kind of access rights. You can only, you have to pay for Bitcoin transactions in the Bitcoin network with Bitcoin tokens. You can't pay with euro or dollars for the transaction fees in the network. So in a way, it's also an access right. In a way, it's also a voting right. But we can specifically represent or take a smart contract and create a token that only represents voting right in a decentralized organization that is governed by a blockchain network, for example. So if we look at the different classes of tokens we can have, this first class of tokens that we mostly talk about nowadays are what I call, in a very neutral way, a gateway drug to the token economy. It's intended to be an analogy, a tongue-in-cheek analogy, are these asset tokens. It all started with so-called cryptocurrencies, but then central banks came and said, well, what if we tokenize our money base and create a tokenized version of our national currency? And this is what we call central bank digital currencies. Commodities can be tokenized and have already been tokenized. And now, over the last 2 years, we've seen a whole new set of tokens that we call NFTs. NFTs started to gain dominance in the in the art world. So we know about art NFTs, tokens that are non-fungible, that represent a unique good or a unique service. But tokens, these NFTs can also represent securities, a deed to a real estate, a share in a company. An NFT can, a non-fungible unique token can represent also art piece in the real world, a kilowatt hour, or ownership of some media. Then we have these credential and attribute tokens that can represent diplomas, certificates that come with information attached about who we are as people, or information attached to an object along the supply chain. What was the origin of that mango, for example, or attributes of an institution. So anything that's a credential can also be tokenized. Certificates of any kind, personal or object-related identities and certificates can be tokenized. Tokens can represent access rights, and tokens can be used as an incentive mechanism to steer a decentralized organization. And I think that in the long run, this type of token class will be the most game-changing token class in the Web3. But we are not quite there yet, because we only started tokenizing assets, more and more assets of the digital and real world. How many minutes do I still have, just to make sure I'm not going over? Probably.
Yes, as you already felt, we are already a bit over.
Okay, I'm just closing this now. I think when it comes to sovereignty in the web, it's important to understand that the wallet is the key infrastructural component with which we manage these tokens. But the Web3 wallet doesn't look like this. It combines functions of an analog wallet, of a key, of a physical certificate or an identity card, but the wallets come in form of mostly mobile wallets today. Key management in the Web3 equals address management in the Web3 equals identity management in the Web3 and asset management. And it's very important to understand that this wallet management needs to be sovereign. And unfortunately, we've seen that many regulators have tried to call what is a self-sovereign wallet a non-custodial wallet. And this is a very dangerous reframing, because if we make Web3 wallets that are completely sovereignly managed without third-party provider services of a centralized exchange, for example, if we call it non-custodial, what was kind of supposed to be self-sovereign and kind of the point of decentralization of the Web3, we kill decentralization in the Web3. So reframing self-sovereign wallets to non-custodial wallets is a very dangerous thing. And if a regulatory body would decide to make sovereign wallet management impossible or illegal, that would completely destroy the decentralization aspect of the Web3, because then we would rely on custodial wallet management by, for example, financial service providers. And then we have the whole problem of the platform economy that we have today. I am fast forwarding to the last slide. The Web3 and token and the tokenization and emerging tokenization of more and more assets and certificates and access rights of the digital and real world has brought us a new discipline of what we call token engineering. And this token engineering is not why we call it engineering. because we want to apply engineering ethics to the design of these new token systems. But the technical engineering is only one part. How do I design these token systems and the infrastructure from a technical perspective? But the legal engineering is another aspect. How do I make it legally compliant? The economic engineering, especially around purpose-driven tokens that are incentives for DAOs, is a very, very important question that needs to go hand in hand with the technical and legal questions. And last but not least, as regulators, the ethical and political engineering is also a very important part. How do I want to design these token systems? Well, and we have two aspects here that are very relevant. And I will fast forward. Power structures in these decentralized organizations that are collectively managed, whether it's a blockchain network or a decentralized social network building on top of it. The question is, how decentralized is the network? And it's usually not it's a gradient and it's not binary. And then it has different aspects. What is the infrastructural decentralization? For example, in a blockchain network, how many people run a node or a full node? Are the services self-hosted or cloud-hosted? Because then we will know how decentralized or not decentralized on an infrastructural level such a network might be. A different aspect is the economic decentralization of a network. If in a social media network, such as Steemit, which is a reality, 90 or 10% or 90% of the tokens, the Steemit tokens, are held by one wallet. We have an extremely difficult Gini coefficient. The distribution of economic power in this network is very one-sided and probably not decentralized. But this is a different aspect to the infrastructural aspects. And then the governance structures, this is yet another layer. Who can vote for system upgrades in this network? Who can decide over how the network, whether it's a social network or a blockchain network that is decentralized, how the code or the governance or the rules, the computational constitution will be updated. And these governance structures can be more or less decentralized. The last question is transparency versus privacy. We will have a full talk about that later on. And I feel that very often KYC and AML laws contradict the necessities of GDPR, right? And blockchain networks have different issues around transparency and privacy. There are different technical instruments that we can use, such as cryptographic means that we can use to have a privacy by design, but privacy by design is probably a function of the purpose we're trying to achieve. And balancing this out will be one of the greatest challenges also for regulatory oversight. The content of Web3 and tokens is very complex. This is why I wrote a book, and I'm sorry I went over time, but I hope it could be a good introduction for the complexities of this new decentralized web that might not be as decentralized as we think, depending on how we will shape it.
Clearly is a complex topic, and that's why I wanted to include this in our talk this week. I feel like a lot could change and will change in the future in everything which pertains to digital and digital infrastructures. So I thank you for sharing for the introduction, and indeed thank you also for the clarification on your role. Indeed, it's a good reminder that internet moves quite fast, and that's why we need to stay on top of it with the best information that we can. So we'll take a quick 5-minute break. We'll be back at 15.8 so that we all get on touch with our inner chakras and whatnot. And then we will continue with Fernando. See you in a bit. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I know it was short, but we need all the time to gather as much information and as many insights as we can on the topic, because just complexity really is the common core thing around here. So let's continue with Fernando. Fernando,
Okay.
ready to pick up?
Okay, thank you very much. I will start by sharing my screen. So, firstly, I want to say that thank you very much for the invitation. For me, it is a pleasure to be here and to make this presentation. So I'll talk about a little about Web3, the concept and the potentialities associated with Web3. So the agenda for today, I will make this presentation of me. After that, I will move to some contextualization of the Web3 until to reach Web3, key characteristics associated with Web3, potentialities, innovation, and last but not least, the challenge and next steps that are associated with Web3. So about me, I have around 20 years of experience in software industry and higher education. I work in many European projects, and I'm currently a professor at Espreia and a researcher at Inestec, and also collaborate with other universities like Central European University, Global Medical University, and the University of Porto. I'm also a founding member of International Association of Innovation Professionals. In fact, blockchain can record any information of values as money, data on sales, contact management, and intellectual property. And cryptocurrencies is essentially a peer-to-peer token that enables anyone and anywhere to send and receive payments. Data are stored in a digital wallet. After that, you can move to non-fungible tokens. What is? You see as a valuation of online intellectual property. There are two characteristics associated with it. First one is that they are unique, and the second one that cannot be divided. Decentralized finance puts the user in control instead of the banks. So there is a move of power to the consumers. After that appears the self-sovereign identity. That is the idea that anyone can create a fire that always remains under their exclusive control. Smart contracts, that it is typically a piece of software that indicates an agreement between two parties that is enforced in majority of networks. So everybody agrees with the contract terms and conditions associated with that. And the metaverse. What is metaverse? Metaverse is typically a virtual world that is created by the community where you can interact with each other via digital presentations. So typically when talking about Web3, I'm talking about these 8 characteristics associated with a more technical approach with Web3. So associated with Web3 appears some potentialities that is important to talk a little about it. When you remove a middleman and manual process, the inclusion of decentralized nodes, you can reduce the costs and increase the transparency, security, and resilience. Additionally, it is important to say that end users is responsible to manage its data. Data is stored on the crypto wallet of the user. Also important is the question associated with the open source that says that now is all support in the open source paradigm. So the code is open. It means that probably when the code is open, it is typically more secure. Okay, that is a characteristic of open source software. And based on that, new startups can emerge based in data-intensive business, supporting the paradigm of machine learning and big data. So this is important because big data is not only, for example, a concept from a perspective, from an economic point of view, but also from an engineering point of view. That is not only a discipline that says what is Web3, you need to have different kinds of competence together. So multidisciplinary competence are typically very important in context to use and to explore and to implement Web3. So let's move to innovation. What are innovations that typically is associated with Web3? Web3 supports the development of new solutions based in crowdsourcing and community models. So it is not one person that really says and really manage all the process in the Web3. People have the power to control their data, which is currently a big issue in the internet. When you look to the Web2 paradigm, you see that you realize that the main problem associated with that is the question of managing your data. Interactions can also occur in 3D space and not only in 2D scenario. And virtual space can give new opportunities for companies, but not only for companies, but also for people, for individuals. Also, rewards can be given in a virtual space. So you can get rewards in virtual space that can be used in virtual space, but also in physical space. For example, you can consider a gamification approach, and based on that, you can get rewards. So you can interconnect Web3 concept with other concepts like Industry 4.0, like gamification, like serious game. So it really brings new opportunities. So this kind of, let's say, technologies and approach. An interesting thing that is appearing with Web3 is the creation of Web3 hackathons. That idea that also emerged in some countries in the context of COVID-19, that is the creation of new startups and to address the problems, the social problems associated with COVID-19. With the Web3, this paradigm starts to evolve, and the idea is the creation or generation of new data business. So there is potentiality to really use Web3 also in the context of hackathons and to bring new potentialities to hackathons. And I will take a little more time to talk about this slide. That is really what I think it's important to analyze. So Web3 is not stable, so it is constantly evolving. So, but there are some challenges that are typically associated with Web3. First one is cybersecurity. Second one is about scalability, interoperability, and also user interface and user experience. That is not exactly the same thing, but are typically associated. The instance of a physical entity that controls the process can bring the idea to the users that they are exposed to cybersecurity issues. That's not really true. But one thing it is important to say, the centralization of operations mean that everybody is more dependent on technology. That can be the target of cyber attacks. So the use of more technology means that probably cyber attacks will increase and not based only in fact that is a new technology and based on the question of Web3. Scalability is also a main issue, considering the scalability trilemma. What is that? That you must address three kinds of goals. First one is security, second one is centralization and scalability. And it is not easy to meet all these three goals together by blockchain. So it is really feasible to address two, but not three together. Also interoperability, because and also user experience. Typically, these are two great challenges also. Mainly, it is an issue when you compare to Web2 websites like Google, like Instagram, like Facebook, that everything is interconnected and users can interact easily with these platforms. So it is not so easy like that because the interface of Web3 applications are not so rich like in the context of Web2. And let's talk a little bit about the evolution. The Web3 concept is not stable. When you talk about Web3, there is only an idea to associate numbers to the web generations. And you can, if you search in the web, you'll see some reports and some opinions text about the concept of Web4 and Web5 and what they mean. One thing that is clear is that these concepts of Web4 and Web5 are not totally clear. Okay? Even the concept of Web3 is not totally clear. For example, 10 years ago, people start to, exactly 10 years ago, 8 years ago, start to talk about Web3. And the idea associated with Web3 was semantic web. And now you are talking, when you talk about Web3, you are talking about these 8 concepts that I present in the previous slide. So the concept really changed along the time. So it is common in this kind of web paradigms. So, but what is Web4? Web4 is the interaction with machines on object webs, is what they say. They say that really people, if not only people interact with web, but also objects, also machines, okay? It is typically very associated with the idea of Industry 4.0. But the physical objects, based, for example, in the Internet of Things, can interact with each other. That's the idea associated typically with Web4. And what is Web5? Typically, but it is not really stable, it is associated with the concept of emotional web. What is the idea? The idea is that machines can interact with humans, but also among them. When you look at Web3, you see emotional web, that emotions can be represented and included in distributed space. So the idea here is to realize the state of individual in a distributed environment, and they can interact. And the web can really read and adapt to the emotional aspects of the human behavior. And like I told, it was a short presentation. That's my last slide, that you can interact with me in the social media. Okay.
Excellent, Fernando. Thank you. As it is with all complex topics, indeed we are seeing more and more questions than clarifications. So I really hope that we do have the time afterwards to take a few, because I think there are some distinctions which all of you could help us with. And I hope Paula is also ready, because we are.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Alex. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for making it to the last session, but not the least one, because we're going to speak about data privacy, and especially decentralizing privacy, data protection opportunities and challenges in the next generation internet. So I'm Paola Hudbert. I'm the head of legal and public affairs of Archipels, which is a French blockchain consortium working on decentralized identity management. And I'm also chair of the privacy working group of INATBA, which is International Association of Trusted Blockchain Application. So privacy is something which is very important to me. I'm a privacy lawyer initially. And today we are going to start by breaking down some data misconceptions that are going to be useful for the rest of the presentation. Then we are going to see what we learned from Web2 and why we need to break data monopolies before diving a bit more into data protection opportunities and challenges in the Web3 space. So let's get started. The first thing I wanted to touch on is that what privacy means to me and what it means to you can be very different. But what we are going to talk about today is a branch of privacy, which is called information privacy. And it is important to remember that this is actually a fundamental right, that every one of us here today have a fundamental right to the protection of their personal data. So next time someone is telling you that they don't care about their personal data, you know, that's always a nice thing to remind. The other misconception that I think is important to remember is that we've been talking a lot about data today, but all data are not personal data. So when I will be referring to data today in this presentation, I will be mostly talking about personal data, which, as you may know, is a data that is related to an individual, a natural person, as you and me, that can be identified either directly or indirectly. So my name is Paola, this is a personal data, but my IP address or my public key on a blockchain will also be personal data, triggering the application of data protection regulations. The last but not least of the misconception I really want to touch on, and Shermin briefly talked about it, is the opposition between privacy and transparency. And it started a long time ago with an author called David Brins. And David Brins, in his book Transparent Society, said that in the age of the advance of technologies, not only privacy was not necessary, but was not even feasible or desirable. So I tend to disagree because nowadays we have additional layers of encryption or obfuscation that can be built on top of decentralized ledger that allows you to reconcile privacy and transparency. So I'm going to cite only one example for the sake of time here, but ZKP, which stands for Zero Knowledge Proof, is actually a technique that allows you cryptographically to demonstrate that an assertion is true without having to revealing the information behind this assertion. So I'm going to take an example to make it more concrete for the audience. Let's say that we have this person named Jan, and Jan wants to buy alcohol online. As you may know, we need to be over 18 years old in the EU area to buy alcohol. So what Jan is going to do normally in the Web2 space is that she will provide a full date of birth to the service provider, to the alcohol vendor. But with ZKP, Jan will be able to only send a proof that she's over 18 without having to disclose this information. So transparency and privacy can work together with these additional layers of cryptography and obfuscation that we built on top of decentralized ledger. So now I think both Shermin and Fernando touched on that, and it was very, very interesting that Web2 was a Web2 of platforms. And now we are evolving towards the Web3 space, and we need to understand that it's important to break these data monopolies. Personally, I love the way Gavin Wood, who's the co-founder of Ethereum, but also of Polkadot, talk about the opposition between Web2 and Web3. So he's referring to the pre-Snowden and the post-Snowden world. And what we realize after this big platform, this Facebook, this GAFAM, being in the middle, is that we human of the internet, were kind of guinea pigs for this model that make as much money as they can of personal data. So let me give you a quick illustration about this guinea pig thing. So here on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see the Facebook invoice. That's something that Olivier Aubert, which is a researcher at the UB, a university in Belgium, made back in 2018. So the goal of Olivier Aubert was to say to Facebook, here, I've been using this network for the last 7 years. This is how much money you actually owe me for the use of my personal data. So this is a crunchy example. This is the end of the presentation, but the idea behind this Facebook invoice is to show that we have two major problems from Web2, which is the lack of data subject, user control over our personal data, but also the fact that we are not getting incentivized, that we don't get sufficient benefits from the use that are made from our personal data. And the good news is that we are going to see how Web3 can actually address both of these problems. So the first thing, which is very interesting, is called self-sovereign identity. So Shermin and Fernando have been briefly mentioning this concept. So to understand self-sovereign identity, it's very important to understand that Web 1, the first layer of the internet, it was built without an identity layer, without a way to handle your digital identity. Then in the Web 2 model, big platform, they try to find some solutions to give you an online identity. So in the centralized model that you can see on the left-hand side here on the little figure, what you will do is that you will create an account, a digital identity per service provider. So I will have a Facebook account, I will have an Amazon account, I will have a Uber account, even a WebEx account to connect to the seminar today. This is the centralized model of handling personal data and digital identity. On the other right-hand side, sorry, you have the federated model of handling digital identity. So in the middle, you have a middleman, and you know that because you see it every day. This is Facebook Connect, Google Connect, Meta Connect, you name it. So here, you're connecting with your Google address, or you're connecting with your whatever person in the middle address to provide identity to services. So the big surprise is that both of these models are not privacy preserving and are, coming from the Web2 space. So what is self-sovereign identity? Self-sovereign identity is a new way of thinking about digital identity, which is really rooted in the principle that individuals should be in control of their digital identity and of all the associated data. So we don't have time here because I think it's very important for the audience to ask questions to really dig into the specifics. But what you need to understand is that it's a peer-to-peer relationship between three parties. You, as an individual, you will be in the middle, having the digital wallet that that was talking about, and you will be storing credentials in this wallet that you will choose to disclose to different parties with consent, granularity, and really knowing what is happening to your personal data. The very good news is that the EU Commission, in its recent proposal to create a European digital identity framework, embraced the self-sovereign identity model. So the piece is currently being debated and will be voted soon. So hopefully we'll have SSI full implementation in Europe very soon. So that's it for the first, new model of personal data processing I wanted to present. The second one, but not the least, is something called data DAOs. So both Serene and Fernando have been talking about DAOs, which stand for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. So just as a reminder, a DAO is an online community, which is organized through one or even more smart contracts, so computational rule on top of the blockchain. And a data DAO is something very interesting and very recent. It's a community composed of individuals, entities, which project is actually to create a common data pool. A data pool which is supporting individual data rights, but which is more interestingly rewarding data owner for their data use. So but most of the projects I've been studying so far involve two prongs. The first prong being the massive use of privacy-enhancing technologies, which is a good news, encryption, differential privacy, secure computing, and of course the DLT as the infrastructure. And very interestingly, they are based on something called data NFTs. So every NFT is a data NFTs, but so it's a data-backed token that will represent your personal data. And what is very interesting is that in the token itself, you can define the data policy. So you can say, I'm the data owner, I want this data set to be used in this setting, but not in this setting, which means that data receivers will be able to run computation on the data, on your personal data backed by the token, but only respecting these policies, and then you will be rewarded on data use. So that's very innovative, and to make it a bit more concrete, let's see an example, which is also very crunchy. So the first data NFTs, one of the first data NFT of personal data, was actually minted on a protocol named Oasis, with the Oasis tech, sorry. And it was a sequenced genome of Professor George Church, which is a professor of genomics. And that's very interesting to see that, for instance, in this context, Professor George Church will be able to get to monetize his genome for research purposes, for instance, giving access to his genetic data through this NFT, being protected with privacy-enhancing technologies. But that's actually very interesting. Okay, we saw the opportunities, but I'm a lawyer, so I always saw challenge as well. So let's dig into the privacy challenges of Web3. So the first challenge, which is important to note, is that the regulation that we've been talking about, with Gemma's talk, for instance, they are all great, but some aspect of this regulation don't really work with decentralized system. And that's very important and crucial that regulators being able to keep pace with the speed of this industry. So let me give you a few examples. So most data protection regulation, including the EU data protection regulation, GDPR, plan that individuals have a right to be forgotten, a right to erasure on their personal data. So this, for instance, clash with the immutable characteristic of blockchain. We of course have technical solution to do so, to ensure in effect deletion of the data, but we don't know if legally it will stand for compliance with GDPR. Another issue that we can see from a data privacy perspective, for instance, is that GDPR was written for centralized system, and when we want to do international data transfer, you might have your data being stored in many, many different places, many different nodes across the world. So how do you do that? And this actually allows me to, open up a bit the question, which is, from an international law perspective, which country has jurisdiction over DLT? And only a few days ago, the American SEC, Security and Exchange Commission, released a court filing, and you can read the last line with me, which is, it's on the Ethereum network, and they just say that because most of the Ethereum validator, the person making the network work, if you want, were based in the US, then the US had jurisdiction over the Ethereum network. So this is a bit of a bomb in the industry because that's the first ruling of this kind. This is only a court filing. Let's see where it goes. But it shows that we have a huge problem with regulation being made for centralized system when it comes to decentralized system. The next challenge, which I want to touch on, is the ownership of personal data. So in every presentation, we've been talking about data ownership. The thing is, when it comes to personal data, there is no concept of property in data protection law. Brazil has a concept of ownership, so cheer up to Brazilian around here, but it's the only jurisdiction I know of having this concept of data ownership. But GDPR, for instance, give you rights on your data. So you have a right of access, you have a right to erasure, you have a right to rectification, but you don't have property rights, more than that. So when we are thinking about this system, it's very important to keep that in mind and to draw the consequences. However, what can be interesting is that we could have ownership over NFTs, non-fungible tokens, and maybe data NFTs. So, this is not sure, and this is a very fast-moving environment, but the thing is, you have two prongs on that. Once we'll say that blockchain title doesn't mean blockchain title. It's not because I have a transaction saying that I am now owning this NFT that I am the owner. And this is actually what OpenSea's terms and conditions that you can see here is saying. So OpenSea is one of the biggest NFT trading platform. And if you read the last line with me, they say that they do not guarantee the transfer of the title of the NFT. So even the biggest NFT trading platform in the world say that they don't guarantee that you are the legal owner of the NFT. But at the same time, we have some courts around the world that start recognizing ownership of NFTs. And this is especially the case of the UK in a recent case, like 3 months ago, that says that NFT is legal property. So we might, this is very prospective here, but find ways to have data ownership by NFT, owning like the representation of the data. So this is the last challenges, and then I promise we can move to question time. But this is a very important one. So we've been talking about data DAOs and the way we could actually use data DAOs to reward the use that is made of our personal data. The thing is, how do you put a price tag on personal data? That's a very, very complex question. What is your data valued? Is that the proportion of the company annual revenue? Is that the remuneration of the value the consumer data has for the business, like we've seen with the Facebook invoice? That's a very big question, and very philosophical one as well. Also, the other issue is that what is worth is not necessarily a piece of data, but what is worth is the aggregation of data. Let me explain. So Cambridge Analytica, I mean, everybody heard about that, I think, was a big case. And what happened is that they used two data sets. The first data set was Americans that bought an American car, a Chrysler, in the last year before Trump election. The second data set was people who didn't vote in the last election. And by combining these two data sets, they were able to target swinger voter, people that didn't vote in the last election, and just to make sure, that they target the right people. So the real value was in the aggregation of data. And the last thing I'm going to say is that data economics and data monetization is a very big topic, and the risk of it is to create a two-tier world where you have one class of the population, the least privileged, that are incentives to sell their data, their personal data, and one other part which are not because they can't afford privacy. And this is what is going on today with so-called cookie paywalls, where you can refuse to have your cookie being you can refuse cookies, if you pay for it. So do we want privacy to be a luxury? I'm not sure about it. And I think we've been talking about values, been reflecting on values. We have questions in the chat about values, but I think it's very important, and it's our collective responsibility to encode information privacy as a default setting, to make sure that the technical realm reflects it to build the next generation internet. So that's it for my presentation. Thank you very much. And question time, I think. Thank you.
Yes, indeed, Paula. Thank you as well. Quite interesting, the last part of your session regarding the price and value of data. We actually had the session on this on Connect University a while ago. It was an interesting topic, but I think we really still need to do more session on this, as it's still quite unclear. It needs more work, and we definitely need more clarity on it. So thank you for approaching it. In terms of regulation, yes, regulating something which is both secure, yet somehow anonymous, yet somehow decentralized, is going to be a huge thing to navigate in. So thank you all for being here and trying to clarify this journey with us. As you mentioned, Paula, I will try and take some questions, especially those which are common to everyone. And maybe the easiest one, although simplicity is not always easy, because there is kind of a debate in the chat on what exactly Web3 means. Is there a way for all of you to simply say in one phrase, what does Web3 mean for you? Anyone can start.
I will start. I will repeat what I said in my call. For me, the Web3 is a collectively where the internet infrastructure and the data structures are collectively managed. It's a collectively managed web on the infrastructure level, but it allows us to create applications, internet solutions and internet organizations that are also collectively governed and managed, right? And this is the big game changer to privately managed web that we had before, or that we still have. And this is,
Indeed. Gemma, Fernando, Paula?
Thank you, Alexandro. I mean, I think our experts have spoken, but I think, from my perspective, the Web3 is indeed focused on the shift towards a user-centric approach to the web, both in terms of the governance and in terms of the infrastructure and the owning and management of the data. It's also to be said that it's a sort of movement, the way I see it, because the principles behind the Web3 and the way then this will be implemented or not, depending whether this will become the mainstream phenomenon, are basically are supported by a group of supporters of people. So this is also a movement, I would say.
Got it.
I'll be brief, but from Web 1 and Shermin was saying the hello web that hello world, sorry, that everybody was putting up on the website at the time. But to me, it's getting back a bit to this philosophy of openness and this concept as well of the post-modern web, that we understood data monopolies, we understand what is going on wrong. And to me, it's a new opportunity to implement data privacy as the main principle and value of the internet.
Well, for me, it's I can say that it is centralization and management of data in a distributed way, and give at the same time power to the users. So I think that is the most important state with Web3.
Got it. Fernando, you also mentioned UI UX. So I'll continue with a question, let's say on this side for everyone. So picking up from the chat, it is said that in Web3, the user's experience will be tailored to their values, preferences, and needs. And how exactly will we be able to do this if we don't actually know their underlying needs? There is actually a good saying in design, which is that good design is invisible and we only notice bad design. Mm-hmm. So can we regulate something that we don't fully understand?
Well, let me try to answer, because it is a very interesting question. But Web3 is mainly addressing issues related with security, centralization, and scalability. So this is main issues that Web3 addresses. With the interface and user experience, that is not exactly the same thing, but when talking about the user experience, is not the main target of Web3. When you say about the ideas to have and adapt the user experience to the users, when using Web3, we are not talking about Web3. Perhaps we are talking more related with websites and not exactly Web3. I think that Web3 will not answer this issue, but it will definitely try to give interface to the users to interact more easily with Web3, but will not definitely answer all this issue. Okay.
From my perspective, to keep it short, since the Web3 is kind of the applications and the infrastructure are collectively managed, the user experience in this Web3 will depend also on the participation of the user. You can be part of co-shaping the future decentralized applications in the Web3. You can be part of co-shaping the infrastructural application, even the infrastructural part. So it's much more, it's a participatory web, and you can be part of participating. However, in order to be able to meaningfully participate, you need to understand it. And it's not the really Web3 for me, maybe even in a nutshell, it's the web of governance. It allows us to co-govern our social and economic interactions globally over internet infrastructure. And it's this new institutional beast that makes you much more, gives more power, theoretical power in your hand. However, whether you assume this power or you delegate it, it's like somebody else has to use it for me. The people who develop the applications, well, you can, in a DAO, the developer will develop, but you vote on how it's developed. You couldn't do this in, for example, in the Facebook world, but with social media applications on the decentralized web, in the Web3, such as Steemit, you can co-govern the rules of the network. However, we know, and this is why the power structures are very important. But what is important to understand, it's not a privately managed web, it's a publicly managed web. And it has, these publicly managed web has much more similarities to how nation states are governed or collectives are governed. It's online digital collectives where participation is key. And you're not an employee or a consumer who has nothing to say. But then you also have to change your mindset.
Yeah, I'm jumping on the mindset side, and I think it's actually, if you want to join these new communities and you have like many different communities, many different DAOs, many different projects, open knowledge, and it's impressive the number of resources you can find, the willingness of people to explain how it works on forums, on this also off-chain governance medium. So I think it's a space which is very collaborative, really based on open source, open sharing of knowledge. So it's very, actually, if you dig into it, but you have to dare to dig into it, you can join the governance and find people explaining how it works. So yeah.
So very last comment from my side on this. It's clear that this is a combination of the skills, then of course this was mentioned, and intention to take responsibility and take kind of the future of the web in the user's hands. So there needs to be a wish for that. But I also take it that it's true that sometimes you say we don't know what are our own needs, but perhaps the needs are quite clear in the sense that based on, okay, we cannot cover the 100% of the population, but based on all sorts of consultations, I mean, we do get the sense that for Europeans, it's important to have control of their data. It's important to have security in the online space. It's important that they have, in a way, a say in how the internet is developed. Then you need to give the tools to the people to pursue the needs. So I wouldn't say that people do not know what their needs are, but perhaps not necessarily they know what the tools are. And for this, education approach that Paula just described is really important.
Yes, and that's why Connect University is here for a bit, at least, to try and cover, even if we achieve a small part of that education. Speaking of very large institutions or general large things move not as quick. And maybe this takes us to a question on regulations. Do you think that regulation will or can move quick enough compared to how the internet moves?
If you don't mind, I take this first. I feel personally concerned. So, well, this is the problem, I think, for centuries, that with the technology, that the laws are not necessarily up to speed. But with the technology evolution, of course, the problem is much bigger. So there are two things. First of all, luckily, we don't deal with technology and with the internet in particular, with regulation only, but a lot with innovation policies. So this is, first of all, very important. Second of all, that more and more the regulatory environment is principles-based. This is one of the way we make regulation a bit future-proof. So what are the objectives we want to achieve? These are imposed, of course, then you need for legal certainty to have a certain set of specificities, but we do not, increasingly, we do not regulate the details, especially as far as technology is concerned, to avoid precisely that the regulatory frameworks get immediately obsolete.
And on that, that's right. Even like in the novel EIDAS regulation, the proposal, like the principle of technological neutrality, is embedded and written. So I kind of agree that agreeing on principle and having like these charters of principle is mostly important than having very specific regulation, because I mean progress never stops. So yeah.
I would like to add one thing. These computational the smart contracts are a regulatory kind of technology in itself. So I think we need to understand that what the Web3, because of these computational constitutions and the smart contracts, allow us a new form of regulation that can enhance our current forms of regulation, right? It can make existing enforcement of regulations, rules and regulations efficient, especially over the internet. And then so these, especially in the context of decentralized organizations over the Web3 or these Web3 networks, they are regulated by the members of the participants of these Web3 networks, the DAOs. And then we have the outside regulation that makes sure that the regulatory framework of the DAOs fit the regulatory frameworks of the societies we have. It's like the regulators should help these new regulators of these new online societies who very often don't have the experience and the regulatory experience, but they're tech entrepreneurs, they're very young, motivated entrepreneurs and innovators, often coming from the background of technology, knowing too little about the history of governance and the practical conflicts that we have in governing societies. So regulators should help these new online communities have the right regulatory frameworks within their online communities. But it's not that something private is being governed, but it's kind of a Entwicklungshilfe. I can only think of the German word right now, sorry. It's about kind of an aid, developmental aid to these new online communities from outside regulators. But it's very important to understand the nature of the Web3, which is very different to current platform economy, and not to try to govern with the principles that we learned in the Web2, something that needs to apply it with the principles of privacy by design will stay the same, for example, in GDPR. But how we regulate the Web3 will be the laws and the regulations need to understand the intricacies of the Web3, which are very different in some regards from the Web2.
Okay, just only let me give my contribution, a very short contribution. I think that the pace of regulation and technology is not the same and will not be definitely the same. However, there is a good contribution in terms of software companies, the term of privacy by design. So it's give more responsibilities to software companies. So software companies need to move from the idea that software is created or developed by software engineers, but also bring and include a multidisciplinary approach of developing software and including people from law since the beginning of the process. And I think that Web3 can give a good contribution in this respect.
Nice. Thank you, everyone. To continue maybe a bit also on the regulation side, but on a specific niche, we have a question. There are discussions of future metaverse-like platforms for e-governance and e-participatory services. Are there any particularities on regulation that you see arising in this specific niche, maybe compared to others? Or is it all industries the same? It doesn't matter what the end goal is of that platform or of that service.
Alexandra, I will say I also think I've seen some questions like, is the Commission planning to regulate? I mean, no. Meaning, I hope not to be contradicted in a couple of weeks, but luckily we do not approach, as I said, every new technological development with regulation first and foremost. But what we try to do, as I said, is to have frameworks that can work for new type of applications. And the metaverse is not just yet another one application. It's a type of application with potentially quite impact on our on the way we experience our life, blending the digital and the physical worlds. So it's not just yet another application, but at the moment what we see is that the regulatory environment, including one on platforms that I mentioned at the beginning, plus the one on digital identity, I mean, artificial intelligence, all the basically components that fuel into the metaverse, are meant also to take into account of new developments. So we at the moment we do not see like a need to start with the regulation first.
Yeah, and just to top on that, I'm thinking about something I read in the news. I mean, I think it was a month ago, but it's the first case of a persona being abused, I think, sexually in the metaverse. So the persona of the character was sexually abused, and that raised the question of like, should the regulation that exists in the physical world be implemented in virtual worlds? So I think it's also touching on the previous question we had, which is we have a sense of general public interest. We have a sense of general norms that should be embedded and that should go down in every different layer and different communities that we are building. If we have like this kind of web constitution, then communities can be independent. But of course, rape, murder, these values cannot exist, whatever the dimension or the reality of the metaverse. So yeah, I'm not in favor to create specific regulation, just to implement general values and principles that Gemma has been touching on before.
Okay, so if Shervinov or Fernand, if you don't have anything to add, we could maybe switch to a different question on Web2. And as most of you mentioned, one of the common issues or common, things that really popped out was the digital champions, if we can call them like that. Very large online platforms arising and benefiting from our data, Facebook, Instagram, Google, you name it. Do you see in Web3 a benefit or small and medium enterprises rising up and using Web3 more better than they currently are?
It really depends. I think from my perspective, it really depends on the SME. Anyone, a private individual and a private company, whether it's a small company or a big company, can be a stakeholder in a Web3 network. So whether they do it or not depends on them. I think, this is. I think the more pressing question would be, what are the new platforms in this new Web3? Because there is, I think, the general misconception that the Web3 by default will be decentralized, and it's not, right? It is, while it's collectively managed, we will have power structures, right? And the question is, where would the new power structures in this Web3 ecosystem and its applications emerge? We're already seeing that in the banking sector, in the financial sector. While wallet management, everyone could theoretically send tokens peer-to-peer, most users in the Web3 today store their wallets with online providers such as for example, online exchanges, which are kind of the new banks in this new Web3, which are the custodians of your tokens. They manage your tokens very often, and you as a user, you don't have any control over it. So there are power structures already emerging in this new Web3, which contradict the narrative of a decentralized web. And the question is not whether small and medium-sized companies have a role. They can have a role if they want to, but the question is, where will the new power structures emerge? Because they will, and how can we as individuals, but the European Commission as a regulator, make sure that the conditions for new types of power structures will be more difficult, or that the power structures are not as intense as they are in the Web2. And unfortunately, I'm not seeing that happen. I'm seeing, unfortunately, regulation happen that helps power structures emerge, because regulators want to give want to regulate something. Apply maybe principles from the old world to something that needs a different type of regulation, right? So I understand the need of the regulator to fulfill KYC and AML laws, but by making self-hosted wallet illegal, you enhance power structures in the Web2. So this is important to understand.
Indeed, system dynamics in general is quite complex, in the sense that trying to regulate something locally can be a challenge, but trying to regulate something, let's be more like on a global scale in this case, can be truly a challenge. And even if we do manage to do it correctly, or as best as we can in Europe, then how can we make sure that, you know, the same rules are followed overseas, in Asia, etc. So truly complex thing to approach. Maybe one last thunder question, quick question for everyone, because we're already way a bit over time. If you were to choose only one issue to be solved as soon as possible in Web3, what would that issue be? So the quick and the
A regulatory question, or because regulator, is this for regulators to solve, or for entrepreneurs to solve, or for the community to solve, the Web3 community to solve?
If it's easy, then we can do both. One for the regulation, one for the user, one for the personal, one for the, you know.
I think from the Web3 community needs better wallet solutions that are more usable and allow self-sovereign token management and data management, because this will really make the narrative of the Web3, bring the narrative of the Web3 into a reality. Right now, we don't have it. We lack good wallets that can manage multiple token types across multiple blockchain infrastructures and have good usability that my grandma can use it, for example. On the regulatory side, it's really understanding the power structures, power dynamics in these new potential power dynamics in these new Web3 networks, and creating a regulatory framework that will not allow power structures that we have in the Web2 to emerge in the Web3. Because the fact that Facebook exists today is because regulators were ignorant of how the internet works. And not only because Facebook was so good in accumulating power, but also because regulators were too slow to understand how the internet works.
Please, Paula, Fernando, Jamal.
I'm still thinking, but I think it's very good remarks, but I'm very sensitive to what Shermin said about not custodial wallets. I think if you want to keep the Web3 spirit and if you want to kill decentralization, you know, you need like to make sure that custodial wallet also possible, both of them being possible in the legal realm. Also, I've been working a lot with INATBA on the novel IDOS2 piece of regulation, and we can see that you know, private or permission that leads blockchain would be recognized as trusted ledger. But it's really asking, I mean, we should be able to also recognize like that the Bitcoin blockchain or other type of blockchain are also trustworthy. They are basically trust mechanism, especially with PO, proof of work. And I mean, this is coming back to Shermin's talk, but the thing is, don't kill decentralization with power dynamic, and I'm very sensitive to what Shermin says.
Okay, I agree that regulation will be a big issue, but I would like to add another component, that is interoperability. Why it is really important? Because Web3 will not replace Web2 immediately. So you need to, the Web2 and Web3 need to coexist. And the big issue will be how they can coexist, Web2 and Web3, and give transparency to the users and give really respect to the users. And users can interact with Web2 and Web3 at the same time and have the benefits of Web2 and also the benefits of Web3. And really, it is not easy to manage that because for a long time, I believe that Web2 and Web3 will need to coexist together.
Clearly, a transition plan definitely makes sense. Gemma, one issue for you that you would
Well,
like to
I think,
see?
I mean, everything has been mentioned. So I would just conclude that it's still not there, the full capability of demonstrating the possibility to fulfill the promises from Web3. So, and this is also due to the fact that, as I think Sharmin said, if you want more users and real decentralized governance, then you cannot have concentration of powers, even in a structure which is conceived as decentralized. But for this, you need to not only the willingness from the people, you need also to make the concepts like our experts have tried to do today, but also the tools to access the Web3 accessible and understandable. So I don't think this boils all down that you break the market powers dynamics through laws. As I said, we have plenty of laws which apply, including to the Web3 space. It's really also about the possibility of the model itself of not following in the same traps in a way that have then characterized the Web2 and the previous models. Thank you.
Well said. So I think that would be it for today, everyone. Thank you for being here. Hopefully you did get some insights. Hopefully we did get closer in what Web3 might mean for us as individuals, but what also it might mean in terms of regulation or good regulation. And hopefully we learned something today. Thank you again for you, the speakers. You've been kind enough to share your knowledge and your time with us. I know how valuable time is, speaking of the value of data. And hopefully I can see or we'll see each other tomorrow as well on the sections on HPC and quantum infrastructure, as well as the one on industrial platforms. Thank you, everyone, and have an easy afternoon. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you.